What's up, everybody, and welcome back to game number 2 of this losers bracket matchup between Mith-Trust and Mineski. If you have not watched game 1, click the bottom left link and it'll direct you to the previous video. But, spoiler alert, unfortunately for Mineski, even though they put up a hell of a fight, unfortunately Lakel's Morphling got too powerful and Mineski made some questionable buyback decisions. But Mith-Trust managed to keep their composure, stay up to Mineski's extremely aggressive lineup, and take the game in the end after a very, very exciting match. So we'll see if Mineski can recover, otherwise they are out of the TI3 Eastern Qualifiers Group B, because this is a losers bracket match. Meow Mith-Trust looking to get to the losers finals, where they will have a shot to move on to the playoffs if they win that series. But still, Mith-Trust do have to take down Mineski once more, and if Mineski can manage to get their act together after playing a solid game for the most part in game number 1, they should be able to take it to game 3. So hopefully Mineski can recover, but we'll have to see as time will tell. Mith-Trust, they do have the first pick, so I don't anticipate them banning out Batrider whatsoever. They were one of the few teams who actually picked Batrider before he was viable in Dota 2, after all the huge buffs that Icefrog gave him. So Mith-Trust, I know they're very comfortable Batrider users, so I don't think they're going to ban out. And Mith-Trust respecting Mineski's Templar Assassin. Mineski's Templar Assassin, even though it's lost both times it's been played, it has been performing rather well, so pretty interesting ban by Mith-Trust. So this might indicate that they might go for a bit of a riskier mid, one that needs a little bit more farm, and TA does do pretty well against heroes who do need farm. Mith-Trust, this could also open up maybe a puck pick, maybe in a melee mid, like a Brewmaster or a Night Stalker or anything like that. But yeah, TA first ban, not something you see too often these days. It was common in the past, but not so often these days. So we're gonna have to see how this will work out. Mial Mineski gonna ban out the Lone Druid. Interesting choice considering they used the Lone Druid in the first game, but I guess they really just don't want to have to deal with that incredible pushing power that Lone Druid does give your team. And Mial Mith-Trust gonna respond by banning out the Shadow Demon, a smart ban, because with the first pick, you probably don't want to first pick up your support unless you really place a lot of high priority in your support in the laning phase. And Shadow Demon is a support that Mineski does like to use. It's a pretty aggressive support, pretty versatile support in general. So it's not too big of a surprise that Mith-Trust are going to ban out. But with what this does leave Mineski open to is a lot of top tier heroes left in the pool. Interesting enough, Mineski gonna ban out the Lifestealer, so I guess they don't really have any intentions of running the Lifestealer themselves. And Lifestealer is a pretty aggressive carry, but I guess Mineski just like that mobility in their carries a little bit more. But Mith-Trust, as fully expected, gonna go with the Batrider as their opening choice. Now Mineski, I've got to imagine they're gonna pick up some combination of Rubik or NA to try to get some form of stability for the Trillion, and then maybe you'd look to secure perhaps the mid or their offlane hero. I'm not too sure who they're going to go for right now. I think Rubik probably will be the choice for Mineski, although they could pick up the NA. They're going to choose Gyrocopter yet again, and I'm not too sure if this is the best choice for Mineski. They've used it twice. They have had reasonable success with it, but I mean, it hasn't been working out. They've lost both times, and even though Gyrocopter is an incredibly powerful late game hero and a very, very versatile early game hero, Mineski don't really seem to utilize them in the mid game, and Gyrocopter does get a little bit weaker in the mid game because the magical damage sort of becomes less and less significant, and Gyrocopter doesn't tend to build to straight up physical DPS. But Mineski are going to pair it with the Rubik, so I guess they have the telekinesis into Rocket Barrage combination that they could go for, but Gyrocopter as an opening, I'm not too sure about. Also, against a Batrider, Gyrocopter might have a difficult time because Gyrocopter is pretty short in terms of range, and Batrider will always be able to get the jump on. And if you can shut down the Gyrocopter, then Mineski's late game damage output can be shut down quite a bit.
10 seconds remaining.
I'd rather see something like a Nyx, because even if Nyx gets grabbed, I mean, he's a support, and you can sort of stun Batrider if he uses the Firefly by just walking into the Firefly trail. So Mineski, I'm not too sure with the Gyrocopter opening. Rubik, of course, a very, very strong hero in general. I'm not really going to disagree with it. So we'll have to see how Mith-Trust responds. I'm not too sure how they're going to lane their Batrider. They could potentially put in the offlane, put it in the jungle, put it in the mid. Even a Trillion I've seen Batrider do well in from time to time. But for the most part, I think this probably will be a mid lane Batrider, although no, Mith-Trust are going to pick up the Dragonite, so this will be an off-lane Batrider most likely. Or maybe a safe lane Batrider, because Visage was the third choice by Mith-Trust, or Visage, as apparently Visage is the correct pronunciation. I had to look on Dota 2 Wiki because, man, that name gives everybody problems. First it was Visage, then Visage. It's actually just Visage, so that makes sense because that's actually how you correctly pronounce that word. But yeah, I guess we're all a bit of an idiot sometimes when it comes to that hero.
5 seconds remaining.
But yeah, Mith-Trust, I'm really liking their draft thus far. Gyrocopter is a bit difficult to engage against an aggressive Tron, but Visage just gives a lot of range in the form of Soul Assumption as well as his auto attack range, and you can sort of just maneuver yourselves around the Rocket Barrage if your positioning is correct. And also, this does indicate that Mith-Trust do want to go on the offensive. And with the Barotter being chosen as well as the Dragonite, that means Dragonite will probably go mid and Barotter will probably go into the safe lane for Mith-Trust on the bottom lane. And Barotter in the safe lane is extremely powerful because he has more room to get the napalm stack, so the opposing hero, if possible, is forced to play even more defensively because they don't have the luxury of getting back to their tower. So Barrett in safe lane I think is probably even better than Barrett in the mid lane in certain scenarios. But Clock is going to be the choice by Mineski, so I gotta imagine that Clock is going to be in the off lane for Mineski. If it's paired up against Barrett, then Barrett will be able to just decimate the Clock, unless Clock manages to get a lot of Cog mana burn spam. But still, Mith-Trust, if you watched the last game, you saw that they got double Courier, so they were able to constantly get the bottle going. So if that's going to be the case in this game, then Clockwork is going to have a pretty difficult time once Barrett manages to hit level 3, level 4, and just will be able to overwhelm the Clockwork at that point. So Mineski, I wonder how they're going to have to... They might be forced into a Keeper of the Light pick for their tri-lane, just to sort of defend themselves against the Visage choice, and also Rubik with the Telekinesis in conjunction with the Rocket Barrage does do quite a bit of damage, so I think Mineski's last support will be something like a Keeper of the Light. But right now, they don't really have too much damage other than the Gyrocopter for the early stage of the game. Rubik himself does not do that much damage. Clockwork does a reasonable amount of damage if you manage to max the battery assault, but his damage is not really guaranteed because it relies on exploiting opponents' position mistakes. So yeah, Mineski, I think they're going to need some DPS, and Keeper of the Light does do a lot of damage, but against a Dragonite as well as Visage and even Barotter, all three of these heroes are very, very tanky. So yeah, I'm not too sure how Mineski can currently bring down these three heroes at this stage in the game with just their current picks. And of course, we do have 2 more picks to go through, so Mineski do have options.
5 seconds remaining.
Mith-Trust gonna bat the puck, noticing that Mineski have yet to choose a solo mid. Mineski gonna bat the Murano once again. So, I don't know, maybe they've scrimmed against Mith-Trust. I really don't see any reason why Mineski would bat the Murano. I guess the Dragonite, Dragon Tail, and Murano Arrow is a pretty powerful setup, but this is probably a support Murano, and if you want to bounce supports in a tri-line, I've got to think better supports are an option, unless Mineski have scrimmed against Mith-Trust quite a bit and just really don't like playing against Mith-Trust support Murano. But since I don't have that knowledge, I can only guess, and with this ban, it's not really that important of a ban, in my opinion. As Mith-Trust gonna bat another solo mid in the form of the Queen of Pain, and that is a very, very smart ban. That would give Mineski some reliable source of magical damage, even though it won't be that effective against Barrett, Dragonite, and Visage. It's something to hold you over until Gyrocopter does get a lot of farms, so smart ban by Mith-Trust. Meanwhile, Mineski, respecting Lakel's Morphling, gonna get rid of that because this time they don't really have the aggressive line that can punish Morphling, and I think in this game, if Morphling went through, then he would be able to split push a lot more effectively just because Mineski doesn't have the damage that they did in the last game. So Morphling is a smart ban by Mineski here, but still, I'm a bit concerned because with Puck and Queen of Pain being removed, I'm not too sure how Mineski can sort of get the DPS need to bring down heroes like Visage, who is very tanky with the Soul Assumption, Barrett, who has a naturally high strength growth, and Dragonite, who, of course, is ridiculously tanky and always usually builds into the BKB after the drums or the armlet. You know, Mith-Trust banning out the Weaver, interesting, because Barrett actually does pretty well against Weaver. Shikuchi has a 0.25 cast time, or 0.25 fade time, so Barrett could always get the lasso off, but I guess Mith-Trust don't really just want to be chasing around the Weaver throughout the engagements, and if that's the case, then Weaver is a smart ban here. Mith-Trust going to pick up the Sand King, and even though I am, again, not a fan of support Sand King whatsoever, can't really disagree with R5's performance on that Sand King. It was absolutely magnificent. He just managed to get multi-burrow strikes to at least 3 people, like 3 or 4 or 5 times, and really helped to sort of slow down Mineski's aggression and just allow Mith-Trust the opening to get themselves the victory. So R5, R5, I expect another pretty solid stanking performance here as Mineski, they're going to pick up a Leshrac, so they're going to get a bit of extra tower pushing. I think this is a good choice. It's a support that does give them a bit more versatility. He could also go in the mid lane, and if he goes mid lane, I think I'd like that a bit more because Leshrac actually does quite a bit of damage if you get him enough items. But if it goes to support, I mean, you really can't blame Mineski. He is a very, very useful as support. And if Mith-Trust for some reason don't want to go aggressive with their trial lane, then Leshrac can punish that by just taking towers very early on. And of course, he does roam well with the Rubik because Rubik has telekinesis and Split Earth. It's pretty easy to sort of combine with that telekinesis and get a pretty long duration stun. But yeah, right now Mineski, they're going to need their mid soul hero unless they put Leshrac mid, and if that's the case they need one more support. But Mith-Trust are picking a very, very tanky lineup. Sanking is pretty tanky even though he's in the midst of every battle because he does have to venture up close and in your face in order to make the greatest usage of his spells. Mineski, one thing going for them is that they have a lot of lockdown as Mith-Trust is going to pick up the anti-mage for Lakels this time. So it looks like Mith-Trust have a really solid late game in their back pocket, but the anti-mage choice indicates that Mith-Trust are actually not going to aggressive try, and in fact they're going to defensive try. So I don't know if this is just sort of a look at Mineski's defensive challenge and saying, alright, we don't want to challenge that even if we do have Visage, but if that's the case, then that's what I got to figure here. So Visage can potentially roam with the Sand King, but I gotta think that Sand King will probably solo roam a bit, and Visage will just do a lot of pulls because Visage, god damn it, is a hero who needs a huge chunk of experience. Mineski gonna pick up the Alchemist to fortify their backline, and it's actually gonna be a carry Alchemist because it's gonna be played by Yanni, so I guess it's gonna be a mid-soul Gyrocopter. So interesting choice by Mineski. They have a bit more tankability, and the Acid Spray does do quite a bit against the Dragon Knight in the early stages of the game, but they don't have the best ways to combat a split pushing anti-mage once he manages to get the Battle Fury. So that could be a bit of a difficult situation for Mineski to handle. But I am quite a big fan of Alchemist because he will be able to outfarm Anti-Mage until Anti-Mage gets his Battle Fury and his Yasha just on the strength of Grievous Greed. And since he is going to be hard carrying it up in that defensive tri lane, he should be able to max that Grievous Greed very early on, maybe even pick up a Midas. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Midas on Alchemist, I think in this game you just want to get as much experience as possible and keep ahead of the Dragon Knight as well as the Anti-Mage at all times. And Midas will definitely help you to do that. So we're going to have a lot more focus on Yanni, who has, quite frankly, not put on the best carry performance thus far. His Drow was not really that impressive. His Gyrocopters have been average at best, and we're going to see, because I think a lot of Mineski's focus will have to be on the Alchemist, because otherwise Anti-Mage can just get the split push going, and Gyrocopter, even if he does pick up something like a Rapier, not really that good against Anti-Mage's split push. And Mith-Trust, not only do they have a strong split push in the Anti-Mage, even if Mineski jump on the Anti-Mage, they have so much counter-initiation in the form of Baradar, Sand King, and even Visage, who does a reasonable job counter-initiating with the birds, that Anti-Mage should always be able to escape, and Mith-Trust can potentially turn ganks around right on their head. So I'm liking Mith-Trust lineup a bit more. The only thing I'm a bit worried about is Visage being in a defensive tri lane, but if Yanni manages to get off to a good start, then Mineski definitely have openings to get themselves back in the game and try to get themselves a very early win. And I gotta think that Mineski sort of have to win it in the early game, because even if they have a Gyrocopter Rapier to fall back on, which is a big if, Dragon Knight and Anti-Mage are just really, really powerful hard carries, and Barrett, of course, as I always say, is the best initiator in the game. Visage scales well, Sand King doesn't scale as well, but I mean, if R5 hits AoE stuns every fight, then I guess you can say Sand King is the best scaling support in the game. So Mineski, I think they gotta win, and they gotta win it early. So, taking a look at the players and the teams, it's going to be TNK playing the Batrider, R5 is playing the Sand King, Abba is going to be playing the Dragon Knight, ST is playing the Visage, and Lakels is going to be playing the Anti-Mage. And checking out the items, Batrider with the Stout Shield, Lakels, nothing too out of the ordinary here. I think Lakels was pulled maybe a set of tangos or a salve. Meanwhile, Mineski, we're going to have Owa playing the Rubik, Jay is playing the Clockwork, Fat Dog is playing Leshrac, JVN's playing Gyrocopter, and Yanni is playing the Alchemist. And I'm pretty excited to see Jay playing the Clockwork, because he is a very aggressive player. And Clockwork, you know, it's a bit of a shame, but since Clock is such a useful spell, Clockwork is being played more defensively these days. But hopefully I can see some Jay Clockwork sort of bring it back into a more aggressive style of Clock. But just checking out the items, And it seems like Mineski are intent on challenging Mith-Trust in aggressive trialing situation. Meanwhile, Mith-Trust just going to block off the pole camp, so I'm not too sure how they're going to land it just yet. But yeah, if Mineski are going to challenge Anti-Mage in an aggressive trialing just to deny him farm, that might work out, but it won't give Alchemist as guaranteed farm. And actually, like what Mineski is doing, they're just going to say, screw it, we'll just get Alchemist free farm, and we'll just try to win on the back of that, and get the level 4 Grievous Greed ASAP. And Anti-Mage, he was pulled a bit of extra gold, so
Invisibility.
let's see, 250, 175, 425. Yeah, he was pulled some tangos. So yeah, Anti-Mage a bit more fortified than usual, so the aggressive try, if it wasn't played by Mineski, probably wouldn't accomplish too much. TNK on the other hand has a stout shield, so he can potentially go in the jungle if he really feels the need to do just that. Oa has the telekinesis level 1, and I've got to imagine Leshak, yep, Split Earth, and Alchemist does have that stun at level 1. So Barrier does have to be a bit careful as the Centaur is going to use. I'm not too sure if this Centaur actually blocks off this camp. I've got to imagine that it doesn't, because what's the point of placing that Centaur if it doesn't? But oh man, Mith-Trust are already going to be on defensive. They're actually going to switch up their sports, going to match Clockwork against Anti-Mage on the bottom lane, and they're just going to challenge the Alchemist because they know the Alchemist is going to be a linchpin in Mineski's game plan. And suddenly Yanni is just like, well, shit, I have 5 stacks of napalm on me, and this is why Barrett is such a strong hero. He's not only the best initiator in the game, he can be laned in any scenario and can accomplish quite a bit because his napalm is such a huge AoE, slows down heroes by a pretty critical amount. The only problem is that if this Mineski Tron does manage to get themselves a lot of magic wands, then Barrett's effectiveness could potentially sort of wane very, very quickly. Meanwhile, beautiful play by Lakel's draining a lot of Clockwork's mana, and Clockwork, he really needs to start controlling the lane, and I think the best way to do that is to max Battery Assault, because Anti-Mage being a melee hero means that he can potentially be chased away by the Battery Assault. It still does a lot of damage, especially to Anti-Mage's relatively small HP pool. But Clockwork seems like he doesn't have much mana, and I think Battery Assault is the way to go, unless he does get a Cogs. But unfortunately, the Cogs is just going to trap Anti-Mage inside, not even going to burn mana. I guess when all is said and done, it burned almost the same amount of mana, 60 mana for the Blink, compared to 50 mana for the Cogs burn. So, it's not the worst situation, but still, I'd imagine he wanted to push the Anti-Mage rather than trapping him, and now the Clockwork is completely out of mana.
Radiant's middle tower is under attack.
And Clockwork scaling up 2 points in Rocket, I don't like this build very much, because what he's going to do with Rocket, he's not going to have enough mana, and I think if you do get enough mana, Battery Assault pushing away the Anti-Mage would just be so much more successful. So he, I guess, wants the Rocket to help out in other lanes, but still, that is nowhere near guaranteed. Meanwhile, Gyrocopter versus Dragon Knight, I do have to favor the Gyrocopter slightly, but one of the annoying things for Gyrocopter is that Dragon Knight just does not care about flat cannon harassment, as I'm going to once again miss the first blood. Just going to catch that very quickly because this is a replay cast, and I can do just that. What's up, bitches? But yeah, looks like there was an initiation onto R5. R5 gonna get stunned by Swarth. Good chain stars by Mineski, but this, oh man, the Lightning Storm, not enough damage to bring him down. Now Alchemist with a lot of stacks on him, gonna unfortunately fall. It looks like Oa was able to pick up the kill, but yeah, Mineski's trial being driven back because Barrett are just too strong at this stage of the game. They can't really afford to fight it. I mean, Stanky for an Alchemist, even though Mineski got the first blood, probably not the best trade, because if Alchemist doesn't manage to get too much farm, Anti-Mage at this point is just getting so much uninterrupted farm that he is just going to get a really fast Battle Fury. And Tranquil Boots, even though Treads is the preferred option, I like this choice a bit more, because one of the ways Clockwork can potentially win back the lane is just throw a lot of harassment. Actually, no, I think Ring of Health would have been just fine. I'd rather Lakel's actually go for the Ring of Health into Perseverance and just pick up the Treads, because Treads actually amplifies Anti-Mage's farming speed by so much. But, I mean, Tranquil Boots is not all that bad. And of course, you can potentially disassemble later into a Vlad's, as Jay, going to take a lot of damage, is actually running away from his tower, so might be in a little bit of a sticky situation, going to take another mana burn, and he needs to use some of his mana very, very quickly, as, well, he still has enough for a Rocket as well as Cogs, and he has still no points of Battery Assault, actually misplacing the Cogs. I'm not too sure how often Jay's played Clock. I have not seen him play it too often in Dota 1, and I've never seen him play in Dota 2, so might be a little lack of spacing knowledge, but I mean, those Cogs are very precious, considering Anti-Mage will always burn the mana. But Jay going to be lucky enough to get himself an invisibility rune, so he's going to not have to use the courier. But meanwhile, Mith-Trust is going to do some dewarding as Mineski trying to desperately get some experience on the support on the back of the pulls, but unfortunately, the other Sentry Ward is going to block that off yet again, and Mineski supports are going to be a bit underleveled. Meanwhile, the mid lane looks like Dragon Knight was driven back. Again, Dragon Knight doesn't care too much about flat cannon harassment, but Gyrocopter can constantly push the way because Flame Breath does have a reasonably long cooldown, and Dragon Knight can never really dive the Gyrocopter because Rocket Barrage just does way too much, even against the Dragon Knight. And Dragon Knight is one of those interesting carries who doesn't really get that much base damage, so Gyrocopter, even though he does have quite pitiful damage, will be able to sort of constantly harass the Dragon Knight back. And you can see Dragon Knight only has 1 additional damage against Gyrocopter, who does have pretty pitiful damage, as Telekinesis will be there on SD. Here comes Splitter as they're trying to change stuns. They do layer it pretty nicely, but the Burrow Strike will delay the onslaught of the Alchemist. Fade Bolt with the Acid Spray going to be enough to pick up the kill, desperately needed for Mineski. But unfortunately, Alchemist only 5 CS, really not having a good time. And meanwhile, Jay completely out of mana. He might have to monopolize the courier. And, I mean, Gyrocopter doesn't mind so much because he will always have rune control, but since Mith-Trust do have an aggressive challenge, if they rotate once forced to contest the rune, Gyrocopter could be in a bit of a bad situation. But it looks like Gyrocopter just conserving as much mana as possible as his bottle is going to be delivered back and forth. Jay just needs it a bit more at this stage. Kel is just making the most of these Tranquil Boots, knowing that if he doesn't use the mana, then Cogs can potentially burn it, so the Tranquil Boot mana spam not really that detrimental to his cause. And hopefully later he will disassemble into Treads, because Treads, again, just amplifies your farming speed by such a big amount. As, R5 in a little bit of dangerous territory, gonna roam in as the words expire, because it does hit the 6-minute mark. But meanwhile, Gyrocopter, since he didn't have his bottle just yet, forced to pick up the Illusion Rune, and his bottle gonna have to deliver to him very, very quickly because R5 is closing in very, very rapidly. Gyrocopter below half HP, the bottle will be there just in time for JVN. He's just gonna bottle up and use the courier yet again. But so far, I don't know. This isn't really going Mineski's way. Antimate is getting uninterrupted farm as Gyrocopter gonna get initiated on with the Dragon Tail. Flame Breath will be there as well. Call down gonna be used in conjunction with the Rocket Barrage, but the double heroes that are gonna negate a lot of the Rocket Barrage damage. And actually, Oa gonna teleport himself back in there. Sandstorm gonna dodge whatever telekinesis Rubik could pop, but just not enough mana to use it regardless. So good gank by R5 in conjunction with the Dragon Knight, and Gyrocopter pretty squishy in the mid lane. That's one of the weaknesses of Gyrocopter mid lane. He's pretty squishy and he's quite susceptible to ganks, as Lakel's going to once again burn all of Jay's mana, and Mineski not looking in that good of shape. Mana Void is not yet up. He doesn't have the mana to use it. But right now, Mineski, I think, even though if they're not winning or not losing top, they're not winning it because they need the Alchemist to farm much better. And he did actually go for the triple points of the Grievous Greed, but you can see he only has 10 CS, so this Grievous Greed only gives around 13 CS probably on the back of that extra gold. Gyrocopter now is losing the middle lane because he did die, and Dragon Knight is already level 8. He's going to have those drums up relatively soon, and Jay is not doing anything to contest this Antivage, so it actually might be safe to say that Mineski is losing all 3 of their lanes just because Alchemist is not receiving any farm. And Mith-Trust laning assignment, putting Barrett in the challenge, very, very smart. And Barrett actually farming so well, and because he's in the challenge, he doesn't really need to stack napalms unless they go for a kill. So he doesn't really have to use the mana, he's just farming up and gonna go straight for that dagger. And once he gets his dagger, Gyrocopter will never be safe. So this is not looking good for Mineski right off the bat, just even though it is only 2-2.
Double damage.
As Gyrocopter, who's tanking with the double engine, and will get the Burrow Strike, gonna do a bit more physical S, and actually just gonna walk away, scuttle on out of there as Sandking 2 wards, level 4, but Sandking, I mean, at this point he doesn't really need to go. He has Anti-Mage, and he has Dragon Knight to fall back on. So, yeah, I mean, this Sand King doesn't really need that many levels as long as his carries get a sufficient amount of farm. And Anti-Age with Ring of Health, 51 CS in 8 minutes. Ridiculous farm up on the kills, as if you leave him alone, he will last everything. And with the Quelling Blade, it's going to be very rare that he whiffs the last hit. Meanwhile, Jay, level 7, pretty high level for Clockwork, but he knows that if he goes to gank, Anti-Mage will just get even more into free farm than he already is, and can potentially push down a tower if one more support rotates in. So it's a very, very difficult situation Jay's in. He wants to probably gank, but he does not want to leave Anti-Mage by himself as he's going to be engaged on the top lane. Firefly is going to be used by Barrett to escape as Abad going to get stunned by Splurth. Nice split earth by Fat Dog covering the retreat of the Mith-Trust squad, but Fat Dog going to actually turn around. Might have been a bit of a lag delay as here comes the call down. It might have actually been a bait, but Gyrocopter just too squishy, can't sustain himself. Alchemist stun going to be there on the Visage, but the split earth was mistimed, a bit of miscommunication. Owa going to be the first one dying in this engage. JVN going to be a lot of trouble. R5 tried to get a double barrel strike, but he's going to accomplish his goal nonetheless, picking off the Gyrocopter, and now Visage with the fully stocked Soul Assumption. Just gonna be too much as Mith-Trust Visage gonna be in a little bit of trouble. 7 HP, but still, so far Mith-Trust seem to have everything going for them, as Barrett will have his dagger 10 minutes in, has a level 6, and will get those lasts on, and Gyrocopter's already died twice. And Alchemist, with his really pitiful farm, he's not gonna have that much of an impact. And usually Alchemist, I mean, he wants to keep 1 or 2 items ahead of an Anti-Mage, but at this point, Alchemist will be lucky to keep up with the Anti-Mage in terms of items. And I don't know, he might not even get a Shadow Blade before Anti-Mage gets his Battle Fury, as I think that might be the Perseverance or the Claymore being... Yeah, it's actually the Perseverance, and Alchemist, all he has is a set of treads, so... Mineski looking in a very dangerous situation. Jay actually was not teleporting there, he didn't actually have a TP. Looks like he chose to get a Magic Wand instead, so... Might have been a bit of a mistake. I'm not too sure how much Jay could have accomplished on the top lane regardless, but still. I mean, now he's leaving the Anti-Mage alone, and Gyrocopter is actually going to swing bot to try to contest the Anti-Mage. He can do that a bit better than a Clockwork, but still, he will always be open to ganks, especially since Barrett does have that dagger up. And TNK, he is hunting his prey. Levels, look at the level of the Rubik. Oh my god, level 3 Rubik. Not looking good as Firefly will be used. Alchemist going to be in a lot of trouble. Lasso will be there. Can Barrett get the sufficient drag duration as Alchemist will get stunned? Did not pop a kill rage, it's actually cooling down, so he's going to take so much extra damage as he does not have that extra bonus HP to fall back on. And TNK will pick up the last hit on the back of the Flame Break. Smoke going to be used by Mineski. Clearly a bit desperate, but who can they gank? They can't gank into 3. Dragonite is too tanky, and Anti-Mage is just too hard to gank. I'm not too sure how effective the smoke will be. Rubik really needs to get levels because Mineski, I think they might have to play for the late game at this rate. And late game is not something they have to go for, but at this point they're just really far behind. Checking experience grab, almost 5k lead 11 minutes in, 3k lead with no towers being taken. It's pretty immense at this stage of the game. And again, I think Mith-Trust do have the advantage in late game, unless Gyrocopter goes super big, but even then he wants to have a Satanic up so he doesn't die to the Anti-Mage as well as the Gyrocopter. And even then, Anti-Mage might just choose not to fight. Non-violence could be the answer for the Anti-Mage as he'll just split push and hit creeps rather than go for heroes. But Mith-Trust, they need to start stacking camps. Alchemist going into the jungle, or he will find some semblance of farm, but not really enough to write home about, as he is still going to be very far behind. Fat Dog just trying to leech whatever small semblance of experience he can possibly get. And the Clockwork has not really been that useful. I don't really think it's any fault of Jay's, but Mith-Trust's movement has just been really remarkable. And the lanes, I mean, maybe Mineski should have just switched as soon as they saw the Anti-Mage solo bot. But as it is, they dug their grave, now they have to lie in it. JVN known to have a pretty big impact as the mid-soul role, really not going to have that much because Gyrocopter is not really an aggressive hero unless he gets off to a good start. And you can see he's going to go for the drums, he's going to be pretty far behind doing that. Bracer being picked up on the clock. The Manus or the Rocket Spam will constantly be there to push out the creep wave, but still Anti-Mage, he's farming CS very liberally, as actually the Blinking Lasso will be used on the Gyrocopter in conjunction with the Dragon Tail, and JVN once again gonna die, and this is just what's gonna happen continuously once that Lasso is off of cooldown. Meanwhile, Lakel is gonna go to the bottom lane trying to solo that tower up. You did actually go for a non-burning build, which is to get a lot of points stats 1-1-1, then max blink is the burning build. Just give him a bit more survivability, but Anti-Mage is just like, well, I'm not in any trouble. Why do I need to max stats? I'm just not going to be in any sort of danger considering Mineski's place in this game. Meanwhile, the sport's really not doing anything. There's going to be a double teleport as Clock doing quite a bit of damage. Anti-Mage is being driven away. Nice hookshot by Jay. They're going to, oh, just barely with the stun up on Lakel's, and he will blink away. Bit of unfortunate timing from the Leshak. If he was level 7, the stun AoE would have been large enough that I would have been able to clip the Anti-Mage. I don't know if the range was sufficient, so I don't think that was Fat Dog's fault, but still, you can see the underleveled nature of the sports really coming back to haunt Mith-Trust, because Anti-Mage, at this point in season, you don't go for the stats. He has so little HP that he can be killed off relatively easily. But it's not going to happen as Alchemist being driven away, just constantly pushing out this Alchemist. But here comes Abba with the Dragon Tail as, oh man, Mineski getting picked off. Not too sure what the Alchemist is thinking. The ward should have spotted the Dragon Knight's movement, but Alchemist just sort of stood there and took it. Not gonna lie, I'm really not impressed with Yanni's play as a hard carry. Could be a bit hard, but I don't think he's making that many great decisions. He's just sort of sticking to his area and just sort of standing there as, oh no, J-Con in the worst possible position. But Locale's probably not going to blink in. He is quite squishy as he won't be able to blink in and get the Mana Void. But still, he got what he came for. He got the tower. His Battle Fury's finished 15 minutes in. And this is really looking very grim for Mineski, 7-2. And I really don't see that many openings that they can possibly get back into this game. They need to get some ganks up on the anti-age with the clockwork, but still, it's going to be difficult to say the least with the Blink Barrier always being in the back of Mineski's mind. So the first two towers have been claimed, and they both have gone to Mith-Trust. That's going to give them immense goal advantage, experience advantage heavily in their favor, and 7.5 experience advantage. I don't usually put too much stock in experience advantages, but at this stage of the game, it is absolutely immense. Rubik not even close to getting level 6. He's still 139 experience from getting level 5, and he's not seeing any creeps die whatsoever. Leshrak not getting level 6. His level 6 is not as important, but I mean, this is just looking very grim. Sanking is level 7, and he's actually making his way towards a dagger. And at this stage, Epicenter will just rip through Mineski. They're just too squishy, and Rubik needs to get levels in order to withstand the Sanking Epicenter on the back of the null field. But Batter hiding in the shadows. I don't know if the Rockets fight him out, but TNK lurking, and Jay, he's going to be spotted by the Anti-Mage. Will they jump in? Jay might be in a little bit of trouble. Oh my god, he's going to totally get jumped on. Here comes the last. So, as I was a bit concerned. I was wondering if Mineski were just wondering if this is bait. It looks like it was, as here comes Rubik on the pursuit. Gyrocopter going to do a lot of damage. They're going to pick off Lakel's. Batter should be able to escape. But it's not all that bad for Mith-Trust because they're going to take down middle tower in the meanwhile, and they did force teleports to that top tower. So it's not all bad for Mith-Trust, even though they lost Anti-Age. I mean, he already has his Battle Fury, and his team is just not being slowed down whatsoever. So even though Mineski did do a successful job killing off the Anti-Mage, they lost a hero and they lost a tower, and Dragon Knight getting dangerously close to level 16, already level 12, 17 minutes in the game. You know, this Alchemist just knows that he's not safe in his own jungle. The Radiant have ward is everywhere. The Dire ward did just time out. Dire have a pretty defensive ward here, trying to spot a teleport to the top tower in order to protect their jungle, but, I mean, they know the jungle is not safe because Mith-Trust are just going to be in there constantly. They can just stay as 4 inside Mineski's jungle and have Anti-Mage split push by his Lonesome on the bottom lane. Meanwhile, Gyrocopter finished the drums, so some would survive progression. Jay, not too sure what he's going to go for. Mineski Fat Dog, not too much money either. Rubik did manage to hit level 5 at the very least. Might be able to hit level 6 relatively soon. He should just try to soak up this semblance of experience. Managed to steal something like a Dragon Tail. I think that would probably be the best spell he could steal in this sort of scenario. That could be very useful, but the range won't be there, so maybe not so much. Blink would probably be the best spell he could possibly steal to still have him to survive a bit more. Mith-Trust, the question is, what do they want to do from here? Will they split push with Anti-Mage? Will they look to end the game ASAP? Unfortunately, since Barrett was in a trial, and even though he picked up a very, very fast dagger 9-10 minutes in, he's pretty underleveled for Barrett at this stage, as he's nowhere close to getting level 11. So that is going to slow down the ganks, but I think Mith-Trust are more than content to play this slow game at certain points, but Dragon Knight could be in a bit of trouble. Nice hook in by Jay. This is definitely what they need. Call down going to be used in conjunction with the Fate Bolt. Rocket Rush doing a huge chunk. Look at how tanky the Dragon Knight is, but they secure the kill. Very much worth it, as the Gyrocopter did manage to secure the kill, getting a bit of a streak. But Lakel is just going to be farming Ancients meanwhile. And this is sort of the bad situation Mineski's in. Even if they gank one hard to semi-carry or hard carry, there will always be another one farming on the entire side of the map because Mineski have to devote so many resources. And Barretter, once again, his last is up, going to go onto the gyrocopter. Looks like the birds will be there. R5 once again getting a multi-hero stun, and the Soul Assumption in conjunction with the lasso will be enough to pick up the kill. Looks like Oa was able to kill off the Sand King in exchange, but Oa definitely going to pay for its life. Split will be there, but it's going to whiff completely, and now Alchemist looks like the Flame Break pushed him back, and he's going to end up stunning himself. Mineski just crumbling at this point. Cute play by Oa, getting himself a kill. Probably was worth it because he managed to hit LA and got himself some semblance of gold, but I mean, it's just not much, and actually Lakel's did what I suspected he'd do. He just summoned it into Vlad's, very early pushing him, and will allow him to jungle with so much ease, kill these Ancients a lot quicker and kill them a lot earlier on. And he picked up the treads, which allow him to farm so much faster, as he is going to switch to agility treads. Let's see if he switches to intelligence treads to give himself a bit more mana. He's not switching him to intelligence treads to give himself a bit more mana, so slight mistakes by Lakelis, but I mean, it's really not significant in this game.
Rock it on.
You know, the farm differential is absolutely astronomical. Alchemist 62 CS, and Alchemist is a hero who can sort of, you know, recover because he will always find a lot of gold. You can see 20-minute Shadow Blade, pretty bad on Alchemist, but I mean, considering the game circumstances, it's not too terrible. As Rubik gonna blink in, gonna get the stun in conjunction with the Splurge, but Lakel's just too tanky with the Straight Thread. Is gonna pop his magic wand as well. Oa gonna blink in ahead, but there's just not enough damage as Sand King gonna channel an absolutely monstrous epicenter. Cooldown will be used to drive away R5 Split. Gonna whiff as the pause does come out by the Rubik. DC is the call as Clockwork not able to get the cogs or the battery cell. That might have just allowed R5 to live. As it seems like nothing is going right for Mineski in this game. But all the while, Abba is farming up on the top lane, gonna go into that BKB. I don't think he needs BKB so much this game, because, I mean, he's so far ahead. He's so far ahead of everybody else on the dire that BKB might be a bit of overkill, but hey, better be safe than sorry. Anti-Mage full 5 ult his head. Experience Graph and Gold Graph fully in favor of Mith-Trust. Almost 13k advantage on both sides at 20 minutes in. That is an immense deficit. And Mineski have some flash farmers that can sort of make up the gap, but I don't know if Mith-Trust will give them many openings to get themselves, or to get Mineski back in the game. But there are openings that Mineski can do. They need to stack camps for the Gyrocopter as well as the Alchemist, which they are doing for the most part. I think they should just I don't know, it's hard. They should just sacrifice their supports and try to keep eyes on the Barrier, because, well, the hook will be enough to clean up the Sand King. So I guess Jay's disconnect did not matter too much, but here comes SD on the pursuit. He's going to get lifted up in the air. Dragon Knight is in the fray, going to be doing immense amounts of damage, just way too difficult for him to kill. Alchemist just missed his Shadow Blade as Clockwork going to trap himself with the Anti-Mage. He wanted to push him back. Anti-Mage just says, nah, you're staying here with me, buddy. And it looks like Mith-Trust is going to end up losing that engagement regardless. The counter teleports were just too good by Mith-Trust. But yeah, Mineski, they can't look for fights. They gotta just disrupt barriers so that you can't blink in, and they gotta just farm. But again, that's a big. How do you actually control a barrier from not ganking you? It's very, very difficult to say the least in barrier. Getting close at level 11, where he will get a longer duration lasso, as well as that 20-second cooldown reduction. And Lakel is just continuing to farm Ancients. Probably go into that mad style next, get himself the Yasha. But he is saving up gold. He could have probably picked up the Yasha, but I guess he still wants to hold on to the Quelling Blade, or the Magic Stick. You know, R5 with the dagger, checking out the items onside Mith-Trust. Visage very close to the mechanism. Actually does already have it finished above with the BKB. Barrier gonna already have that 4th step finished. And Lakel's holding on to 3.1k. Meanwhile, Mineski, Rubik, not so much. Clockwork, he's getting items, but items on Clockwork are just like very, very irrelevant. Well, what can the Clockwork with items honestly do? His spells don't really get better, he just gets more survivable. And if he doesn't do damage, then it won't really matter, because all his teammates will die around him. Gyrocopter, unable to pick up any farm whatsoever. Did manage to get something, getting an Ogre Club, so gonna go for that BKB. But there is always a Lasso to consider. Alchemist does have the Shadow Blade, and he has not died in a bit, but it's still very dangerous for him to farm when Barrett does have that dagger online. And Alchemist is a hero I think can deal pretty well against Anti-Mage in a one-on-one matchup, but Anti-Mage, if he just split pushes correctly, won't really let that happen, because Alchemist has such a low base attack time that if you pick up a Basher, you can just overwhelm the Anti-Mage. The question is if Mith-Trust allowed the game to get to that point, and the answer is probably not.
Middle tower is under attack.
But Mith-Trust, I imagine they should try to. I think they should just try to take their advantage and win with it. Anti-Mage is level fucking 17. Jesus, he is almost tripling. Well, he's more than doubling up the Rubik as well as the Leshrac at this stage in the game. As there's going to be a initiation by the Dragonite onto Jay. Here comes Baron, going to grab the Leshrac. Epicenter will be used as well. Going to do so much damage. Jay will be the next one to fall. Fata already bit the bullet. Looks like the Gyrocopter going to get absolutely demolished as well. Multi-kill. And Barrett picked up a double kill, and Mith-Trust is going to roll. They're not going to let it get to the endgame scenario where Alchemist can potentially fight the Anti-Mage. They're just going to take this advantage and roll with it to the middle set backs, and there's honestly nothing Mineski can do to combat this. So Mith-Trust going to take down the middle barracks, and Alchemist doesn't really mind too much if the barracks are down. The thing about Alchemist is that even though he wants to be ahead of the competition, because he can get ahead very easily on the back of his Grill Screen, he is tanky enough, and he does attack quickly enough that he doesn't mind going late. The problem is that the creeps that will be farming, and also you can fight against Rax Deficit, because Grill Screen will always give you a ridiculous amount of gold, regardless if you're facing super creeps or not. The problem is that this Alchemist has been kept down so hard that he can't really find any semblance of farm. And Mineski gonna get a Roshan taken from under their noses, and they know it. Flare gonna fly in, and Mineski, I don't really think they can fight this. They need to just farm their neutrals, get some farm. But Mith-Trust gonna back off for now. Dragonite did not have his ultimate ready, so I think that's the reason why they backed off. Gem was picked up on the Dragonite. Visage had the mechanism, of course. Looks like Sanking. Probably gonna go into a 4 staff, or even maybe a Veil. Could be a solid item. And Anti-Mage actually picked up the straight up Baroque. He is going to go straight into the Abyssal after the Yasha, so just saying fuck Manta, just getting as much damage as possible, and going to try to stun down the Gyrocopter or the Alchemist, and they try to fight me mano y mano. And smoke up by Mith-Trust. Mineski have no idea this is coming. Jay going to be the unfortunate recipient of all of Mith-Trust ridiculous magical damage. And Lakel is just going to spitefully kill out the Centaur, going back into Roshan, and Roshan gonna die. And at this point, I think I've already said it numerous times, but it's so difficult for Mineski. R5 actually gonna dodge stun by burrow striking, and gonna use a sandstorm. Anti-Age picks up the Aegis, and it's a sad day when your two main farmers are being driven back by a solo Sand King. Visage gonna go for the Agnum Scepter point booster. Gonna be very, very good. Dragonite getting close to level 16. I think Mith-Trust will probably try to get the level 16, or maybe they won't even feel it's necessary as Lakel's just actually tried to go to work on the Rubik, but just gonna back off right now. He's still relatively squishy. I mean, he didn't go for any points in stats, and all he has is strength tries to give him some HP. But I mean, he has an Aegis, and he has max level spell shield, so that gives him a bit more survivability. As Dragonite seems to not want level 16, looks like Mith-Trust just want to end it. And I can't say I blame them. Anti-Mage does have the Abyssal, as there's going to be a last one on the Gyrocopter for the umpteenth time. Baroner going to get the 4-staff off. Here comes Dragonite, picked up the dagger yet again like he did in game number 1. Anti-Mage is now back in the fray, going to kill off the Gyrocopter. BKB going to be used by the Dragonite as he is moonwalking because of the lasso stolen by the Rubik, but Jay going to be there at the hookshot. Rubik ended up dying. Jay going to die. And I think that is going to be it for Mineski in this turn. Yes, they are going to call GG. Good luck next game. As Mineski showed flashes of brilliance, they definitely put on a pretty solid performance. Representing the Philippines quite well, but you saw the gap. The decision making was just questionable at certain points. The lanings by Mineski were very, very weak in this game. And they paid the price, and they're going to be the second Filipino team to be knocked out in the group stages of the International 3 Eastern Qualifiers. We know Mith-Trust put on a convincing performance in this game, but we'll see if they have what it takes to match up against one of the Chinese teams in the losers bracket finals. But hopefully you enjoy that game. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with the next game very, very soon. So I'll see you next time. Peace.